Hello, everyone. I'm Professor Geek. Welcome back to the channel. And today I heard the sad news about Denny O'Neil's passing. Denny O'Neil was truly one of the greats in comic books. He had an understanding of them that you just don't find today. You find it today, but you don't find it among those actually working in comic books today, sadly. He was an incredible writer, and I wanted to talk about specifically some of the lessons I think people need to learn from Denny O'Neil. This is part of his legacy that I think we need to insist that comic book creators keep in mind today. Whether that means those that end up with the shattered pieces of anything left over from DC or Marvel, or whether it just means people writing their own comics. These are invaluable lessons that sadly very few people take to heart. I know a lot of people have been doing some great tributes to Denny O'Neil, and people who've worked with him or have perhaps a greater insight into his career. I just know that everything I've ever read of the man's I thought was just incredible. Really was impressed with him as a writer and an editor, both of those things. So the first, and I've talked about both of these aspects I want to bring up, these lessons. I've mentioned them both before in different videos or different live streams, but I want to put them both together now as a tribute to his great work. The first thing I want to mention is he knew when to admit he was wrong. Comics have forgotten how to do that. Comic creators do not know how to do that. They are simply incapable of admitting when they've made a decision in continuity or with a character or with the universe that was wrong. Denny O'Neil made the decision back in the day to strip Wonder Woman of her powers, not take away the costume and just make her sort of a secret agent. And he had decent motivations. I mean, he thought he was doing the right thing. He thought he was trying to make it so that, you could just have an example of a strong woman in comics who didn't need to rely on powers or this and that. He thought he was doing the right thing for young women reading comic books. It was made abundantly clear to him by many, many people, Gloria Steinem included, that was not the right move for Wonder Woman, that she was there representing how a woman can do the exact same thing as Superman can in the context of these comic books, with powers and with the costume and all of that. And Denny O'Neil realized that. He said, you know what? You're right. I was wrong. And he fixed it. He gave Wonder Woman back her powers, back her costume. That in that era of her, there's still good stories written in that era, but and I recommend people check it out just for the writing. But that was a wrong move to make for her character. And instead of trying to pretend that nope, it's right, instead of being like Marvel and just saying nope, it's your medicine, you've got to take it even if it doesn't taste good, Tom Brevoort, or trying to be like Jim Lee or Dan DiDio and say, nope, that's just, we got to shake things up, got to shake it up, or people aren't going to be interested anymore if we're not constantly changing and pulling the rug out from under you. You couldn't possibly want to buy comics without us doing that. No, he realized that was wrong and he fixed it. And I just respect him so much for that. But the second one that I want to mention is one that I tend to talk about a lot whenever I bring up Denny O'Neil. And I just have got so much respect for him when I heard him say this. It was in one of those comic book documentaries, The History of Comics or whatever. It's a common story that he tells. But when he was editing Batman, he was editing the Batman run during the time that they were killing off Jason Todd. And if you remember the history of that, they had done a call-in vote for readers. This is Jason Todd, the second Robin, who had turned out, developed into kind of a snarky, bratty little kid, bratty little Robin. Dick Grayson had gone on to be Nightwing at the time. So they did this call-in vote for readers. You could call this number if you wanted to vote for him to stay alive, or vote for this, or call this number if you wanted to vote for Joker killing him, and killing him won out. So they were going to kill off Robin, and that was in all of the papers and everything. Kind of like Superman's death later. No one really cares about comics until you hear about this one beloved character or whatever that they happen to know from a TV show or a movie or comics maybe they once read when they were a child or whatever. So that was in the news, and it was a big deal. And he said that he went to lunch one day into this deli, and he had a little Batman pin on his lapel there in New York City, when DC Comics were still based there. And somebody asked him about the Batman pin on his lapel, and he said, oh, well, I edit Batman comics. And the guy behind the counters, yelled over to somebody else and said something like, hey, Louis, this is the schlub who wants to kill off Robin. And they were all very angry at him. In their mind, he was killing off Dick Grayson's Robin, the Robin they knew from the Batman 66 show, or the Robin they always knew from, Batman and Robin. They're a team, they're a thing. And Denny O'Neil said he realized everybody's looking at him angrily. And, he realized in that moment that he's not just an editor of comic books. He said, I realized that I was a keeper. I was a guardian of American folklore. Can you imagine a comic book creator using that language today? They have absolutely no context of that. Superheroes are not even remotely American folklore to the creators we have today. The fact that Denny O'Neil acknowledged that, just I take my hat off to him so much that and that's really the way he conducted. And I'll get to that in a second. But these characters aren't American folklore to people like Nick Spencer. They're tools to preach your politics through. These characters aren't American folklore to Dan DiDio. They're tools to stroke your own ego with, to shake it up, to be cool like Marvel or whatever. These characters aren't folklore to Tom King. No, they're tools for which I can work out my own trauma. They're not American folklore to Scott Snyder. They're action figures he can dress up in new costumes and new characters and new stories and all this kind of nonsense. They're certainly not American folklore to Brian Michael Bendis. He just comes in, does no research, pisses all over the wall and calls it quits and says he's had a great run. Pardon me, but that's just the truth of it. It's a shame, and I'm very saddened by the passing of Denny O'Neil. But I'm terribly saddened as well that he wasn't working in comics. Now, I know he'd retired, but the fact is we have a lot of great creators who have done amazing work and who are still capable of doing amazing work, who are consistently passed over by the people in charge just for those hot new writers. For whatever reason, somebody thinks that a Scott Snyder or Tom King story is going to sell more than a Jerry Ordway, or a Marv Wolfman. These people are still out there doing great work when you give it to them. What in the world is wrong with you, comic producers and publishers? I just don't understand it. So that's the second lesson, is to realize that even if you're just a independent creator, and you're writing your own character that is not ingrained in the American consciousness, write it as though it was. Write it with archetypes in mind, and write it with the gravity of the importance of comics and what they do to American mythology in mind, and perhaps your character will become that one day. It's you don't just treat it as some light fluff. Some people did at one time, but it's grown beyond that. American comic books, and specifically comic book superheroes, are a uniquely American art, and they've transcended just America. They've become mythologies for a lot of different cultures now, and mythology has power. So keep that in mind. Don't treat it lightly. Don't just jump for the spectacles and the shake things up and this and that. The third lesson is about the writing. The writing has to be there. Denny O'Neil wrote an amazing book, DC Comics, How to Write Comics. I forget the exact title. If you look it up, you'll find it. People always ask for good books, and there are a lot of good books on comic writing out there, but his is the go-to. Denny O'Neil's How to Write Comics. It's like the official DC How to Write Comics. It's great. He gives you examples of scripts. He gives you the terminology. He tells you the different ways to approach writing scripts. And more than just about comic writing and like the technical aspects of the script, he gives you good writing advice, incredible writing advice at last. Also, I recommend people pick it up. It didn't matter what he approached. He always treated the writing as something that needs to be on point. I haven't read everything he ever wrote, and I'm sure he obviously grew as a writer, from the stuff he wrote early on. But I've read things. His Batman stuff back in the day was just phenomenal. When Batman 89 came out, the movie, it was so popular that DC had to create a new Batman title because Batman and Detective were selling off the walls, and they needed a new Batman title. So they did Legends of the Dark Knight, and it was incredible. And Denny O'Neil wrote that, and it was a Batman, a beginning of his career Batman, not necessarily fresh off the streets or anything like that, but it was the beginning of the career Batman. It's a phenomenal run. I highly recommend people get it. Batman Shaman. It's in a bunch of different collected editions and different volumes. He approached that this gimmick, it seemed like, oh, we just need a new line. We need something else. At a time when anything with the word Batman on it was going to make money and be successful, he didn't phone it in. He wrote out good, solid stories that hold up today and hold up with the character. He didn't rely on spectacle. He didn't think, oh, well, we got to do something new. Everybody else is doing Batman. And at the time, everybody was. There was Batman everything in the stores. There was Batman everything on TV, and it's just everywhere. Everybody had to get a piece of the Batman. So, he could have easily done the Scott Snyder route. And, oh, well, how can I shake this up and make it a earth-shattering multiverse fabric of reality event or whatever? No, he just sat down and he wrote a good, solid story completely in the character of Batman that people already loved. He knew how to do that. He knew how to respect his characters. He knew how to respect the writing, the craft of writing, to tell a good, solid story. I learned so much from him reading his books and reading his book on how to writing. The man knew what a splash page was for. It's not a freaking establishing shot. You're not writing a film. You're writing a comic. Put a hook in there. I mean, he just knew these things, and he was phenomenal at it. So I'm going to mourn the passing of Denny O'Neil / celebrate his life by reading some great Denny O'Neil works tonight. I've got so much of his stuff. I'm talking about Batman and Wonder Woman in particular, but he wrote and edited for a lot of other great runs as well. I recommend you just throw his name in Google. You'll find something that you're interested in because he worked on so many different things. So it's sad that we've lost Denny O'Neil. It's incredibly sad that people who still are alive, like Denny O'Neil, aren't getting a chance to create wonderful comics anymore. And it's the saddest of all that nobody is learning from these wonderful lessons that Denny O'Neil has left us and that other comic creators have left us as well. So fix this. I mean, the comic industry is dying, and good riddance to it, honestly, because nobody at DC or Marvel, knows what's what and how. Even with the shakeups and the firings, nobody who knows what they're doing is coming into any kind of power at either of those places. So the burden then falls. The burden of this great American art form of comics falls to the independent creators. Whether you're writing your own comics and putting them on crowdfunding, or whether you're just selling them on Amazon or whatever, or whether you're going to start pitching them to independent publishers, this is where the future of comics is, the comic industry. And whatever happens with the beloved characters and our American folklore characters, whether they go into public domain or not, the archetypes are still there. The archetypes are still there, and nobody owns the copyright on those. So learn about them, use them. That's what my channel's for. I have a ton of videos about it. One of these days, I'll get out that archetype book. I promise. In fact, this is the very next project. So we'll talk about that. I'm in talks with a publisher and everything. But that's all I have for today. Very sad to hear about Denny O'Neil's passing. Let's celebrate his great body of work and learn from the wonderful lessons that he left behind. And until next time, keep enjoying and digging deeper into the hero stories you love. Thanks for watching.